I invite anyone out there, any content creator that wants to farm views, please logically investigate my position and then provide the ways that I am inaccurate in what I'm saying.
I mean, he said we could do it, so I'm gonna. To be honest, I don't really have many issues with what ASMONGOLD has been saying here, but I want to make some minor suggestions on why he's getting the type of feedback that he is, and what he doesn't seem to understand about all the pushback. I think Asmon's position on everything that's going on is a little bit too defensive, and I think this clip is a perfect example of why what he's saying is technically correct, but it feels so wrong to listen to.
Who here gets to choose their fucking hours at work?
Not a lot of people.
The fact that you guys even have the goal to compare yourselves to regular people when your extra hours of labor are rewarded with more and more money is insane.
Well, I think most people get paid overtime, to be fair. Yeah, I mean, if anybody is working extra and you're not being paid for that, you're not getting paid overtime. Not salary? Oh, yeah, that's definitely true. But if you're being paid hourly, you do get paid extra.
So technically, yeah, if you're working overtime, you get overtime pay. That much is kind of obvious, and I think it's kind of disingenuous to act like that is the issue. I think the core issue here is that people like Hassan are already incredibly compensated for what they do. They already have enough money to not be concerned about any of the issues in life. Just like Asmon says later in the video, people who don't have enough money are upset that people who do have enough money are complaining because money would solve all of their problems. And obviously, people who have a lot of money can still have issues that they're facing in life. But the outrage here and with this response is that Hassan doesn't need to work as much as he does. He doesn't need to put in 9 hours a day in order to get by. He's not fulfilling his core needs. He's fulfilling excessive needs. Arguably greed. The greediest fucking socialist I've ever seen. He's not doing that work just to get by. He's being excessively compensated for it, and he's extremely well off. So to hear somebody who doesn't need to work in order to sustain themselves talking about how difficult their job is and how draining it is, most people's natural reaction to that is to say, hey, fucking stop. Personally, I think a more accurate way to sort of push against the Abba and Preach video is to say, you say he can just stop, but when it comes to streaming in online spaces, it's difficult to retain your audience, and the easier you take it, the more likely you are to lose your audience, which Hassan is already in the process of doing. But by you running this weird defense where technically you address the issue, but you're really not addressing the underlying core of what people are upset about, it can be frustrating to watch. I was actually getting mad listening to this at work today. So when people say you're out of touch, they're saying you're sort of out of touch with the underlying issue, not with the technicalities that you're pointing out that are factually correct, technically correct. I think most of what Asmon says in this video is pretty accurate. But with just this one section, this is an 1.5 hour long video, and just this one section, after which he says, you can respond if you want to. I was like, yeah, I'll respond. I got this in the bag. I feel like this is a really easy concept to understand, and people are getting frustrated listening to you run what seems to be an extremely hardline defense where you're nitpicking just to make Hassan seem like he's in the right, or to make your own take seem like it's not worthy of the backlash that you might be getting.
Difference is you're millionaires that decide to work more because you want to. Well, what would it matter? Why would that matter? So if I'm talking about, so for example, like if I'm talking about, and I think this is really what the problem is that people have with this topic, is that people are unwilling to accept that anybody that makes a lot of money is allowed to have any problems with their job. And I think that that's just generally the reality. It's that people are not willing to accept, and they are not sympathetic, and they don't care about what a person who's making a lot of money is having.
You're right. The average person does not care about the problems of people who are not held captive to work in order to sustain themselves. The difference between Hassan's problems and any other given person's problems is that Hassan can make them go away tomorrow. And he'll be completely fine for a long time, maybe for his entire life, I think. I don't know how rich Hassan is. But now you're out here running this Seattle Seahawks tier defense for this guy, and you're telling it to your audience, most of whom are going to be your average person that is going to have to work in order to survive. Whereas again, Hassan, and maybe even yourself, can just stop tomorrow, and you'll be completely and totally fine. It just sounds completely detached when both your and Hassan's audience, who are essentially funding your lifestyle, is the average person who can't just stop like that, who don't have those opportunities in life because they just don't have money. It's not a hard concept to understand. People are upset about rich people complaining. People don't like rich people complaining. You're absolutely right about that. The issue is that they're completely justified, and it's weird for you to run this defense in the first place.
I know that people actively live in, I guess, what's the word for it? Like, people live in a sense of constant frustration that they see people like Hassan or people like me, and they're like, well, these people are in a very good position, and I don't want to hear these people complain about their position at all because my position is very bad. And I understand that. Now, this is, in my opinion, I understand it, but I to be honest with you, I really don't respect it. I'm sorry, but I don't respect feeling that way, because it's an emotional perspective that's selfish. And I think that anybody out in the world has a right to own their own problems, and nobody else in the world has the right to take that away from them. And I really dislike this idea that because some person has it bad, they try to go out of their way to invalidate other people who have other problems that they deem less important. I think this is an incredibly toxic way of talking. It's an incredibly toxic way of looking at the world. And at the end of the day, I think that we're all very privileged in a lot of cases. That's why we're sitting on here with high-speed internet, probably in most of the cases, air-conditioned houses in a first world country in many cases as well, according to my analytics, having conversations about this kind of stuff.
And now you've just completely lost me. You don't respect it? I think you're running defense a little bit too hard here, because if you were actually stepping back and seeing this objectively, you'd understand, and I know you know this, that you are the content. Hassan is his content. And when Hassan's content becomes him complaining about the issues that he's facing, the people who he is entertaining are going to get frustrated, because they're going to sit there and say, hey, wait a minute, this rich asshole is complaining about the difficulties that he's dealing with in life, and I'm paying for it. If I'm subbed to Hassan, I am paying him to tell me how much he is upset about, his day-to-day goings on. And you address this. You know this. You said so yourself, that nobody wants to hear somebody who's doing their job complaining about, how much their job sucks. If they're paying Hassan to be an entertainer, they want him to be an entertainer. And you know what's not entertaining? Bitching about your life and, how much, I can't talk to my buddies after work. Fuck me. How in the hell is that content in any way, shape, or form? And you know it's not content. I know you know it's not content, which is why it's so confusing to watch you run this defense for him. The fact of the matter is, if the content is going to be Hassan complaining about how tough his situation is, then everybody has the right to talk shit to him about it. They all have the right to say, Hassan, you are so full of it, and I think you're just the biggest, I think he's the biggest tool. And quite frankly, it's weird that you don't understand that and are nitpicking it so specifically in order to create this point that is technically correct, but completely misses the mark on the entire conversation.
I think that the real problem and the real subtext of why people are angry is primarily class consciousness. I think people are mad that, like, for example, if like a 200 viewer streamer said what Hassan said, I think that people would be a lot more sympathetic towards it. And I think if it was somebody besides Hassan that said it, I think people would be a lot more sympathetic towards it. I think that in general, a lot of people are very negative about it because not only it's Hassan, but also Hassan is speaking from such a position of privilege that I also share.
Yeah, no shit, man. Hassan is the class consciousness streamer. What do you expect? This is like 90% of the shit the guy talks about. Of course people are going to be focused on that aspect when he's supposed to be the one that's exceptionally aware of all these issues. He's the one that talks about them all the time on his stream. And yet, when it comes to him, he doesn't apply the same rules. For somebody who understands so much about class-based issues and frustrations, it's weird that he seems so fundamentally detached. Well, to be honest, it's not weird at all. He's a fucking millionaire. He doesn't get it, and everything he says is bullshit, but that's besides the point. Look, at the end of the day, I think you just missed the forest for the trees on this one. I don't think your argument holds up to scrutiny in two ways. When it comes to the nitpicking and the specifics, I don't think you considered the fact that this is Hassan's content. This is what he streamed to people as his content. He was in the middle of doing his job, bitching about his job, which you already pointed out is a stupid thing to do and nobody likes it. Hassan is not bound to his current situation. He's not held down by his job, and if he's going to complain about it to so many people, they've got every right to be annoyed. And it's equally annoying to have somebody in your position turn around and point out all these specific details and say, well, look, you guys You guys don't have any right to be frustrated. It doesn't make sense for you to be frustrated. It's not morally righteous for you to be frustrated, and you're blowing this whole thing out of proportion. And if you look at the overall situation, it's frustrating to listen to a person who could solve their problem that they're currently complaining about like that. I know it, everyone knows it. Unfortunately, this time you don't know it.